I, like most of you I'm sure, watch a fair bit of football. And for better or worse, that tends to mean consuming quite a lot of punditry and analysis, some of which can be very good, some of which can be not so good, and an awful lot of which is just quite boring. In recent years, we have seen a rise in more opinion and debate-driven punditry in England, something which has long been a common theme of football coverage in other countries, but is a bit newer here and can sometimes seem a bit awkward. Last weekend, following Manchester United's 1-1 draw at Chelsea, Keane and Jamie Carragher engaged in a particularly heated debate, heated there being the favourite word of Sky Sports' YouTube manager, about Cristiano Ronaldo. The debate itself, despite being described as brilliant by Football Bible and television gold by United View TV, was actually quite painful to watch, or I thought so at least. It was a bit like two deaf chimpanzees fighting over an insect that has already flown away. But during the back and forth, Keane made it very clear that even with Cristiano Ronaldo, Manchester United were never going to win the Premier League title, and that Ronaldo wasn't even brought in for that purpose, but rather to help the club win cup competitions with knockout formats where Ronaldo seems to thrive. Keane's assessment that Manchester United are not and never were realistically going to challenge for the Premier League title this season, or at any stage over the next 3 years, has been echoed by so many pundits and fans that it has basically become accepted orthodoxy. And the assertion now goes largely unchallenged. Those of us who didn't have our entire memories erased, Men in Black style, back in October, and have some memories that go back more than 3 or 4 months, could be forgiven for thinking that we were going a little bit crazy. But the idea that Manchester United are still a million miles away from winning the Premier League title, which is commonplace now, certainly was not shared by an awful lot of people not all that long ago. Manchester United finished second in the Premier League last season, 5 points ahead of Liverpool and 7 points ahead of Chelsea. Over the summer, the club brought in a 4-time Champions League and 1-time World Cup winning centre-back in the form of Rafael Varane, who ought to be at his very best right now, and one of the best centre-backs in the world, aged 28. He was joined by long-term target Jadon Sancho for a fee of £73 million, who was signed following 3 sensational seasons in the Bundesliga and a year after the Red Devils initially tried to sign him. And last but not least, towards the end of the window, in came one of the greatest footballers and still one of the greatest goal scorers to have ever lived, in the form of club legend Cristiano Ronaldo. Varane would slot in alongside Harry Maguire, seemingly adding the finishing touches to the Manchester United backline. Fresh off the back of a really solid season, Maguire was beginning to look more and more like a Manchester United captain, and he returned from a brief setback to star for England at Euro 2020. Even making the team of the tournament alongside Leonardo Bonucci at centre-back. His club and international comrade, Luke Shaw, was being held in similarly high regard, having enjoyed a really strong finish to the season and a fantastic Euros campaign all of his own. Sancho added a healthy dose of flair and attacking output to an already very exciting, young, English attacking cohort, who would now have Cristiano Ronaldo, as well as Edinson Cavani, as their footballing mentors. Meanwhile, it is pretty obvious what Cristiano Ronaldo brings to the party, on the pitch at least. This was not, as some have suggested, a team that was being built with the 2024-25 season in mind. It was a serious investment that was made with the intention of competing with Liverpool, Chelsea, and Man City. I'm not saying that Manchester United were the favourites to win the Premier League title, but they were firmly among the 4 favourites, far closer in terms of the bookmakers' odds to Liverpool and Chelsea than they were to Arsenal or Tottenham. Most bookies had Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side at odds of around 8-1 before a ball had been kicked to win the Premier League title. Some as short as 5-1, others as long as 10-1, compared to 5-1 for Liverpool and Chelsea and 40-1 for Arsenal and Tottenham. I don't particularly like quoting bookmakers for a myriad of reasons, but they do lend a certain element of statistical evidence to disprove the notion that no one thought that Manchester United could come close to winning the Premier League title this season. However, whether it is the bookies, fans, or pundits, the vast majority of people put Manchester United closer to what we might now call the top 3 teams in the country than they did to the rest of the chasing pack. To suggest otherwise is to totally misrepresent the past and to rewrite history. And for what reason? In Roy Keane's case, I suppose it's possible that he is trying to rehabilitate the reputation of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Keane clearly still has a lot of loyalty to his former teammates, and maybe he thinks, either consciously or subconsciously, that he might be able to go some way towards exculpating him if he suggests that Manchester United had no grand expectations or title ambitions in the Premier League this season, and therefore the fact that they were sitting in 8th place at the time of his dismissal, whilst not very good, isn't actually all that bad. But it really is that bad. And I say that as someone who quite likes Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, thinks that he isn't nearly as bad of a manager as some people make out, and thinks that he arguably did the best job of any post-Fergie manager in terms of genuinely progressing Manchester United prior to this season. For others who have no loyalty to Solskjaer, maybe they just want to seem wise after the fact. I guess we are all guilty of that to a certain extent. When our assumptions and expectations are pulled out like a rug from beneath our feet, we either console ourselves with the idea that we never really believed what we previously thought and that we're not really that surprised by what has actually happened, or we try to convince others that this is the case. I can say, in all honesty, and this is on the record in previous videos which make it very difficult for me to pretend that I haven't been wrong about a great many things, that whilst I didn't expect Manchester United to win the Premier League title this season, Man City were my pre-season favourites, I did think that they would be in the mix with Liverpool and Chelsea, and that the top four seemed pretty nailed on, unless someone from outside of those four had a really barnstorming and almost faultless season. For what it's worth, I do still think that Manchester United will most likely finish in the top four this season, but it's unlikely that it will be comfortable, and they are now at 300 to 1 odds to win the Premier League title with some bookies at the time of this recording, which is longer odds than you will get with Arsenal, Tottenham, and in some cases, even West Ham. That really is catastrophic underachievement on a truly epic scale, and not the entirely predictable failings of a terribly run club, as many have suggested. Manchester United are terribly run, just to be clear. They are by far the worst run club, from a solely footballing perspective, out of the Premier League's so-called Big Six. And the current situation surrounding Jesse Lingard, who they could have cashed in on for a not inconsiderable sum of money over the summer, is yet more powerful evidence of that fact. However, clubs that are run poorly from a purely footballing perspective can still win trophies. And the level of investment at Manchester United, combined with homegrown talents like Marcus Rashford and Mason Greenwood, means that they do still have a wonderful, albeit rather dysfunctional squad of players. I made this video primarily because it was starting to irritate me that everyone was making out that Manchester United had no title aspirations this season, which, as I have hopefully established, is completely ahistorical nonsense. And if you, like me, were thinking that you must be going crazy, well, fear not, because I don't think that you are. And if you are, at least you're not alone. One person to whom this myth-making and rewriting of history is great news for is Ralf Rangnick, though, since it means that there has been a dramatic lowering of expectations just as he arrives at the club. He now inherits a team who, apparently, are a million miles away from ever winning the Premier League title. So, if he can get them playing anywhere near the level of the top 3 teams, that will be deemed as a huge success. It is a situation which is somewhat reminiscent of Thomas Tuchel's arrival at Chelsea, in place of Frank Lampard, which I always felt was a dream job for any manager worth their salt. And Tuchel enjoyed more immediate success than even I could have imagined. I think Ralf Rangnick's job is much tougher, because he is inheriting a less balanced and, as I say, quite dysfunctional group of players, many of whom appear to be totally out of sorts right now. Where Chelsea had talent in pretty much every position and a raft of rapidly improving young players, Manchester United are laden with more problem positions, shall we say. Holding midfield is the most obvious one, but Raphael Varane's injuries, Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw's shoddy form, and Aaron Wan-Bissaka's seeming stagnation, if not decline, ever since joining Manchester United from Crystal Palace, are all others. Perhaps the biggest, partly because of the media frenzy that will surround it, is how he chooses to utilise Cristiano Ronaldo. As I said in the introduction, that inane debate between Roy Keane and Jamie Carragher, which has since gone viral on social media, centred around the signing of Ronaldo, and particularly why Ronaldo was signed. Carragher argued that Ronaldo was signed to try and win Manchester United the Premier League title, and that if they were no closer to winning the league with him than they were without him, they shouldn't have signed him in the first place. Keane argued that Ronaldo was signed in an effort to win cup competitions and that he was not responsible for Manchester United's struggles, pointing to his impressive goal-scoring record since arriving at the club. Evidently, it is the case that Manchester United are no closer to winning the Premier League since signing Cristiano Ronaldo. In fact, they seem considerably further from winning the title now than they were last season. It's also true that if Ronaldo can't take Manchester United any closer to winning the Premier League title, but is able to get the club over the line in the FA Cup or certainly in the Champions League, which would be one hell of an achievement, then he would have justified his almost £500,000 a week wages and the reduction in game time for the likes of Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, and Mason Greenwood. However, what both Carragher and Keane both fell into the trap of thinking is that there was any one reason why Cristiano Ronaldo joined Manchester United or was signed by Manchester United. If there is one takeaway from certainly the post-Alex Ferguson and David Gill era at Manchester United, it is surely the fact that there is almost no joined-up thinking going on at that club. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer may well have wanted to sign Cristiano Ronaldo because he is one of the best goal scorers in the world, making it far too good of an opportunity to turn down, and because of his winning mentality and devotion to the game, which he hoped would rub off on the rest of his squad. Ed Woodward might well have been primarily motivated by the financial upside of the deal, which was huge for Manchester United. Ronaldo is among the most marketable athletes of all time, and whilst the finances involved in his return to Old Trafford might seem wild from a purely footballing perspective, in the broad scheme of things, they probably make a lot of sense for the club. The Glazers possibly signed off on the deal motivated by both arguments, albeit both with economic aims in mind, but also because of the preceding 6 months plus at Manchester United. There were widespread protests at Old Trafford throughout much of last season, as there have been for a number of years, though they reached something of a crescendo following the European Super League debacle. It's not without precedent for the Glazers to sanction the arrival of a shiny new signing when they are particularly unpopular with fans, and they don't come much shinier than Cristiano Ronaldo. I haven't even mentioned the quite likely possibility that one or more parties involved, not least Alex Ferguson, if certain reports are to be believed, were motivated not necessarily purely, but certainly to a significant extent, by a desire simply not to see Ronaldo join rivals Manchester City. And then you have Cristiano Ronaldo's own reasons, and I personally don't believe that Ronaldo joined Manchester United thinking that there was no way that they would win the Premier League title this season, but that they might have a chance in 2024-25, by which stage he will be 40. It's no secret that Ronaldo is motivated, to a greater extent than almost any other player, by individual accolades. And the only way that he was going to win the big ones at Manchester United is by winning the Premier League or the Champions League, or, at the very least, enjoying a truly awe-inspiring Champions League campaign littered with unforgettable moments and reaching, at the very least, the semi-final stage. I don't believe that the pitch to Ronaldo from Manchester United could possibly have been, as Roy Keane implied, that maybe he could help the club win a few cups. I suspect that Ronaldo would have to have been convinced by two things to join the club. One, that Manchester United would pay him as much or more than Manchester City, which they did, and two, that they could compete with Pep Guardiola's side, along with everyone else, for the biggest prizes. Money may well have been a consideration, and Ronaldo's own earning potential, both right now and in retirement, is likely to be bolstered by further increasing his legacy at Old Trafford. Being adored by the biggest clubs in Spain, Italy, and England certainly can't hurt your bank balance, but I simply do not believe that Ronaldo would have joined Manchester United if he wasn't convinced that they could challenge for the biggest trophies and that he could play a key role in those successes. The lack of joined-up thinking at Manchester United that I think Keane and Carragher fell into at least a momentary lapse of overlooking could well come to an end under Ralf Rangnick, though only if he is given sufficient control over the day-to-day management of the club. There has been much talk about whether Ronaldo can fit into Rangnick's high-intensity, high-pressing game, and whether it was his decision, for Manchester United, to drop Ronaldo against Chelsea. I highly doubt that was the case, and whilst Ronaldo might not be tailor-made to play in Rangnick's brand of so-called rock and roll football, it is worth noting that he took Schalke to the semi-finals of the Champions League and won the DFB Pokal with a strike partnership made up of a 34-year-old, and soon to turn 35, Raul, and Klaas-Jan Huntelaar, neither of whom were renowned for their energy levels or tireless pressing, certainly at that stage in their careers. Rangnick compensated for that fact by having a midfield that was packed full of pace and energy, with Jefferson Farfan and a young Julian Draxler on the flanks, along with some real workhorses in central midfield. But crucially here, Rangnick is someone who has typically found a place for his most talented players, and a way of accommodating them, even if it takes a bit of tweaking. Anyhow, that is a slight tangent to the central theme of today's video, and is perhaps another video for a whole other time. Thank you all as ever for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.